welcome to Taking the Myth, your topical, skeptical discussion show. I'm Stephen Knight, and joining me is the awesome, the amazing, the wonderful, the available this evening, Iram Ramzan. Iram, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm slightly confused though. I think we've gone back in time to April with all this rain.
Yeah, I am considering building an ark. Fuck rounding things up 2 by 2 though. As a matter of fact, I think I'll purposely be making some omissions.
Yeah, I don't think you want 2 of everything.
Snails. What's the point?
Yeah. What is the point of snails? I think, you can't just have 2, say, cute puppies, can you? You need more than one. I'm not really a dog person, though.
Well, they're haram, aren't they? Somebody won't get to heaven. Yeah. I can't remember the exact part of the hadith, but it's not good.
And also, rodents. Who wants rodents on board? Fuck that.
Plague-carrying scumbags. Somebody's already typing, it wasn't the rats, it was the fleas on the rats. Talking of snails, I've just got a tropical fish tank and bought an assassin snail. Have you ever heard of an assassin snail?
What?
Exactly. It's you can find them on the grassy knoll. No, they're just a really strange, colourful and strangely shaped kind of snail. Basically, this is really boring. This is the worst start to a podcast ever. But if you're filling a tropical fish tank, you can only have so many fish based on a point system, depending on how big your fish tank is. And snails are 0 points, so I just went to town.
Oh, sorry. Zoned out a little bit there. You were saying?
Yeah, notice board items is what I was saying.
Okay.
I want to get our fine folk that are our listeners involved a bit more. So I'm going to encourage you, if you're listening, if you have any opinions on anything, maybe you have an opinion on snails. Who knows?
No one has an opinion on snails. They're just the most bland, boring fucking creatures that only the French could have dreamt of eating.
They are
what the hell?
Slugs with a mortgage, aren't they? That's what they are.
Yeah, that is the only way you can make them sound exotic. So, yeah.
Assassin snail, though. Come on. Assassin snail.
Oh, it goes at 3 miles an hour instead of the normal, 1?
Yeah, it'll get you eventually. Yeah, so if you hear anything on the show that you want to chip in on, you have an opinion, you want to tell us we're just wrong, I mean, as fanciful as that might sound, send it out on Twitter. Use the hashtag TTMyth, and what we'll do is we'll look at your feedback, we'll look at your opinions, and we'll just ignore them, as usual.
Yeah, perfect.
But maybe, just maybe, we might read them out on another show as well. So if you, loads of people listen to this show, like thousands and thousands and thousands of people listen to this show, you're all very quiet. And it's because usually I ask you to submit questions and send some feedback, and you do, and then I just ignore it. So I'm going to commit to not ignoring it right now and involving people. What do you think, Iram?
Yeah, you do that. I'll carry on ignoring.
All right, well, the first thing I want to speak about, the first story, many people may have seen the video doing the rounds of this, and it was of a lovely woman in a fancy, sleek black garments, also known as the niqab, shouting, I suppose, quote-unquote, abuse at people marching for Pride. So if you'd have seen the footage, it was all a bit mild in terms of the rhetoric. She was there watching the passers-by, people, waving rainbow flags and the like, holding, gay positive placards, etc., the kind of things you'd expect at Pride, and she was wagging the finger and shouting, "Shame on you, it's despicable, shame on you." And I even think at one point she said, "It's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve," which is 10 points for the partridgism there. Now, I obviously think that's not a good thing to do. I don't think people should do that. However, she has been arrested. The police said they would investigate it and they'd be looking into speaking to her, and they have arrested her. This is from The Guardian. A 38-year-old woman has been arrested after homophobic abuse was shouted at people taking part in a pride march. Footage posted on social media showed a woman wearing a black niqab repeatedly shouting "shame on you" at participants as they passed. One of the participants was wearing a rainbow LGBT flag. No shit, Guardian. Thank you. So what's your opinion on this? Arrested for shouting at people at a public protest.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe she was just expressing her Muslimness.
Oh, very clever. I see what you're doing here.
To the see what I did there.
I did.
I'm in kind of two minds about this, because although she's clearly a nasty, nasty cow, that's the mildest language I can use. God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. If that was the case, then they should have arrested those protesters outside the Birmingham school where people were holding placards saying Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, because they didn't want primary school children learning that there are LGBT couples out there. So if they were arrested, then why was she? Okay, fine. She says, "Shame on you, you despicable people." It's clearly wrong. Did she also say something that was crossing the line? Do you think?
I don't think so. So I actually think arguing with someone because they're gay is crossing the line, all the lines of decency and civility and morals, right? But I don't think transgressing them things should automatically be a criminal offence. Don't necessarily think the police need to involve themselves in that situation. Because there's about four things going on here. So, first of all, if you can't argue down a bin bag shouting I think I referred to as a ranty shadow shouting about Adam and Eve, and it's not Adam and Steve, it's Adam and Eve. If you can't deal with that without the police, your movement's in trouble, okay, for a start. So it wasn't that egregious, the things she was saying in terms of hateful. She wasn't threatening anyone. She wasn't saying she was going to come around and, kill the kids. I might take exception to that. Second thing is, it's a public march. They're marching for something out in the open. They're making a public statement. It is, you could say it's political in a sense. So she has the right to dissent. That's her right to dissent. So I don't understand how they can say it's a criminal offence. I understand people being annoyed about it.
I can understand why people thought that she was being horrible, because she really was, but she has the right not to agree to a march taking place as long as she's not actually being physically violent or actually coming out with really homophobic abuse. She was being a bitch, basically.
Massive bitch,
which, as far as I'm aware, isn't a crime. And if it were, I know loads of people would be banged up by now.
Yeah.
But do you know what really do you know what really sort of tickles me? How did they find her? You mean, I'm serious. Like, she, because I remember Saida Warsi, the Baroness. She used to be part of David Cameron's cabinet, and she tweeted, "Oh, let's all, let's help identify this woman." How are you going to identify her? Her face is covered, but hey, our police managed it, so goes to them.
Even so, here's the situation we're in. So that's absurd. I mean, it has just highlighted an issue in terms of security. These garments, these conservative Islamic garments, that potential criminals cannot be identified. Now, that's sometimes obviously the case because criminals do tend to cover the face a lot. But what do you do in a situation when it's normal? It's been normalised to the extent that you might not be able to identify a Muslim female because it's a default garment in their community, as happened here. So another point is mocking that and mocking the absurdity of "help us find this woman," that's considered beyond the pale. The ridiculous situation we're in here, where have you seen this woman, and we all have to laugh and say, well, she's an eye-slit, basically. And now that's considered beyond the pale. You remember the trouble Boris Johnson got in trouble for making jokes about letterboxes. I suppose the Americans would know them as mailboxes. But the thing that I thought really signified something out of this whole episode, I don't know if you noticed, in the video when the woman's shouting, you're despicable, and pointing at these LGBT supporters, one of them shouts back, "That's what the racist and fascists say about you." So I just thought that was such a limp, impotent, don't recognise fascism when they see it response. They have got a clear, unambiguous, hateful homophobe in their midst. And their progressive programming, instead of saying, argue with her, tell her she's a shit, notice that maybe there's some hostility coming from the Muslim community to LGBT rights right now. What they've done is they've run some default software on their progressive little noggin that has said, must defend the minority from racism. Doesn't matter what she's shouting at me or how she's behaving, I can't see past her cultural identity, I can't see past her skin colour. I must mention racist and anti-Muslim bigots, even when I'm being abused by a Muslim. Don't you think that's insane? Do you think any other demographic on the planet would get that kind of response for being a hateful homophobe?
No, and that's what I wanted to come on to. I noticed that there was a reluctance to call out this behavior for what it was, and that is Islamic homophobia.
Yeah.
You know, people were just very quick to come out with, oh, we must condemn bigotry in all its form. It's all wrong. And I thought, why can you not be specific in this instance? We get it. Homophobia exists everywhere. You know, there are plenty of white non-Muslims in this country who don't like gay people very much or think it's a bit icky. Yeah, I admit that. There's problems in all sections of society, and we call that out for what it is. But when there's something specifically in one type of community, we're very reluctant to call it out, or at least some sections of our community are. They'll just say, oh, you know, this is all wrong. This person does not represent my faith. This is not what my faith is about. And you think, but she thinks that's what her faith is all about. That is her expression of Muslimness. Do you see the problem that we're going to get into very soon? You know, so she thinks it's part of her religion to hate homosexuality. You know, for her, being homosexual is unnatural.
I love how far behind the Muslim community is on this because Christians hit a wall of liberal defiance and dissent and criticism with their homophobia. They've adapted now, and they talk about the sanctity of marriage and the, they talk about tradition, and they talk about the nuclear family. They've adapted their arguments to try and make them more palatable, when really they just think homosexuality is a sin. The Islamist contingent of our country, not even Islamist, conservative Muslims, which make up a significant portion, I've seemed to notice, they're quite unambiguous with their rhetoric. They're talking the way Christians in our country did 30, 40 years ago. So, and that is because they have not had a similar level of pushback that you would give any Christian, any fundamentalist, any homophobe of any stripe would get a bitch slap, metaphorically, of course, for espousing such hateful homophobic views. But she's literally there at a march of people who identify as LGBT supporters, people that should know their shit, who are, presumably their raison d'etre at that point is to promote LGBT rights and protect them, can't even deal with this woman adequately. I just found that was really disappointing to see this guy, instead of talking about her homophobia, start saying, well, what about the racist and fascist that hate you? We should be on the same team, kind of thing. Fuck them both is what I think. This is why I have a very dim opinion of Pride.
Yeah, and I think I just don't know what arresting her is going to achieve. It's going to be a waste of time going through the courts with that. Nothing's going to happen.
Do you think they'll do a police lineup to identify her bring in the suspect?
That is Islamophobic, you absolute bigot. You know what, though? I just thought, I know everyone was joking, how the hell is anyone going to find her? But you know what? It is easy if you know who that person is. I mean, I was on the bus once, right? And a woman got on wearing a niqab, and I instantly recognized her because of the eyes. It was this girl I went to college with. I didn't say hi to her because I thought I was about to get off the bus.
Wait. You make eye contact on the bus?
Well, this was in Manchester.
Psychopath.
This was in Manchester, where people actually speak to one another, by the way.
This is true. Even when you don't want them to.
But yeah, so I recognized her instantly. So I guess, maybe one of her friends dobbed her in. They're like, oh yeah, that's Rashida. Yeah.
But maybe there's maybe she's just a local village nut job. Oh yeah, that's Fatima giving up to her old tricks.
I did notice a few people online saying, "Oh, maybe she has a history of doing this." I don't know where they got that from. I think she has a mental health problem. Right. Okay. So it's the same thing that happens after a terrorist attack. When it's a Muslim guy, we're very quick to say, let's not be quick to talk about motives here. It's nothing to do with religion, but let's not talk about motive. And then when it's a white guy who they say, oh, the suspect has mental health illness, they're very quick to say, oh, of course he has mental health illness. If he was brown, he'd be called a terrorist. But so, yeah, I just don't, there's so much hypocrisy here.
Yeah, it's difficult, and it is, might bring us on to another story, but I did a video a while back, because Mehdi Hassan, that diligent and not at all dishonest scholar of Islam, he used to throw out this trope every time he got a speaking opportunity at TV about how, if the shooter's white, all of a sudden they're a lone wolf or mentally ill. But if it's a Muslim, they're a terrorist. And he made this glib comment about how it's great being a Muslim. Apparently you can't be mentally ill. And I did a video where, there's so many cases of Muslims going on attacks with either knives or guns and not being charged with terrorism and being, sectioned or detained under the Mental Health Act. So I think in Europe especially fairly, if there is a mental health component, it is recognised, and that's regardless of ideology. A lot of people have a bit of struggle comprehending what we mean by terrorism and how it works. People say stupid things like, well, were the victims not terrorized? And it's like, well, that's not what that means. Just because you felt terror doesn't mean it was terrorism. Terrorism has a very clear definition. It boils down to the fact that it has to usually have been carried out for a political motive. Sometimes it can just be a hateful act. Sometimes, most of the time, in fact, in America, it's just someone who's let their anger explode. And unfortunately, if you let your anger explode, you can behave violently if you're that kind of person. And unfortunately, if you're in the United States of America, you have easy access to firearms. So it might be worth moving on to the 2 mass shootings we've had in the States very recently. What are your thoughts on them? Top 10 favourite American mass shootings?
Oh, God.
I mean,
I think
I'm so desensitized to it.
It's every other day there's a fucking shooting, and I mean, this month alone there have been 18 shootings, and we're only in the 14th day into August, and yet there have been 18 shootings. That is ridiculous. And the latest was on the 12th in California. Police officer was killed and 2 were wounded. And then on the same day in North Carolina, a man shot and killed his estranged wife and a man, and then wounded another one before killing himself. And then the day before in Chicago as well, 6 people were injured when they were shot by some random gunman in a park. I
think we can say this is a uniquely American issue, isn't it? I mean, uniquely American problem. The rest of the world is looking in with horror and incredulity at the situation, and not just that, the fact that Americans will talk about anything and everything other than gun control, and that's because
because of the Second Amendment. We've got to protect my Second Amendment right there.
Yeah, I mean, there is that.
No one's taking away your rights if you limit your control on guns, for fuck's sake. You're not living in the 18th century. I just don't understand why people have to get really, really defensive about this one particular amendment.
Well, it's a national religion. That's what it is. It's enshrined. It's sacred. It's similar. It's a very similar. Just to sort of shine the light back on ourselves a bit, we have a fairly similar gut response whenever the NHS is spoke about in less than favourable terms. We seem to love our NHS. That's become almost like a national religion in our country. Now, I appreciate that we're Brits looking in from the outside, and I don't make this argument easy on myself, because there's a lot of idiots in my country who'll say they should ban guns, and that's like, oh well, if we're talking about magic, why don't we just click our fingers and have no crime? Because that's what that is. If you're to say we should ban guns in America, that's a pipe dream. They always talk about the Australian model. Well, they ban guns in Australia, and that way, that's not even the same thing. So we've got to talk about gun control making it harder for people to get guns, more stringent checks, less variety in the type of guns you can have at home.
That's what they did in New Zealand. That's what New Zealand did after that horrific Christchurch massacre. They restricted the ownership of certain types of guns and introduced proper background checks. Obviously, they're not going to prevent all gun deaths. They're not.
And someone got annoyed with me on Twitter the other week because I said, so basically, if you get in a violent confrontation in England, more often than not, it's very unlikely someone's going to pull a gun. And it's especially unlikely that someone's going to shoot you and they have been legally justified in doing so because you've threatened them or made them feel fearful. So if you get in an altercation with somebody in America and you're punching somebody, or you maybe you have a dispute over someone's caught your car or something, you get out of the car, there's pushing and shoving, and someone pulls a gun and shoots the other person, there's a good chance that person's going to be, oh well, that's fine. They attacked you, you defended yourself, you have the right to bear arms, you have the firearm legally, yep. That's fine. Right? I'm not saying this happens all the time, but it did happen a couple of weeks ago in a case. And I said, well, this is that sort of escalation is a uniquely American problem. This is why a lot of police in America shoot people, because they can't be sure that the person they're dealing with hasn't got a weapon. And if that person's not complying, they can't take any risks. Sometimes people who don't have weapons get shot in America because they don't comply, or they try and shove the policeman around. That's never going to happen in the UK because we don't have guns to this extent. So what I'm saying is, sort of physical altercations in America get ramped up to 11 straight away in terms of threat value because of the looming spectre of firearm possession. I remember tweeting out once, I don't know why anyone bothers doing scare pranks in America. That's fucking dangerous, isn't it? Jumping out on people unexpectedly in a country that people are legally allowed to have weapons. Some states open carry, in fact. I would never scare anyone in America. I'm in New Jersey at the end of the month, by the way.
You're going to get shot, aren't you?
Maybe. Who knows? So, did you see Donald Trump's very...
No, yeah, I blame video games too.
Games.
Just it. I think we should just ban games consoles and ban video games. Yeah, I think he called that the gruesome and grisly video games for contributing to the glorification of violence in our society. I mean, there was a really good piece in the Financial Times about this, and it sort of explored the connection that video games have on violence and shootings, and it actually doesn't really. No. I mean, there's loads of studies now showing that there's just no connection actually, or between the violent games and aggressive behavior in teenagers. So there's no correlation, and if you think about it, if there were, then I guess teenagers in Japan or South Korea would be really, really violent as well. And there's not exactly a high, there's not a similar rate of violent crime there. I mean, they're supposed to be the lowest in the world, apparently. I think it's just people want to look for an easy answer than an easy solution. So it's easy to pick on something.
It's like when they blame Marilyn Manson for Columbine. And they've always pointed the finger at entertainment. And I remember the great philosopher Arnold Schwarzenegger once said, he was asked whether or not he thinks his movies influence violence. And I think I remember him saying something like, well, he'd accept that hypothesis. He didn't use these words, I don't think. He said he'd accept this.
I can't imagine him even being able to say hypothesis.
That's what he says. He said he'd accept that hypothesis if violence only started the moment Hollywood did, but it seems to predate entertainment by quite a stretch. And in fact, violence is decreasing. It doesn't feel like that because we see it more. It's in our ears, it's on our smartphones constantly. But I want to play devil's advocate a little bit. I am very passionate about the burgeoning platform that is virtual reality. I think the potential there and what it is currently and what it can be is going to be commonplace. I think it's going to be as commonplace in households eventually as your smartphone. I think when people sell game consoles in the future, it'll be strange for it not to have a VR element. And I've got a couple of VR headsets. And it's life-changing. Everyone I've took every family member I visited or friend I visited with this new VR headset I've got, which is a portable wireless thing, they've ordered one immediately because it can do so many things. And it's this immersion. Now, up until this point, hitherto this point, that's tautology, isn't it? Video games, I don't think, have influenced violence. However, I did interview Professor Jeremy Bailenson from Stanford University.
Okay.
Now, he's got a VR lab. He's actually worked with the military, training them, because they actually train the military in VR now, because in some places, because, you know, you don't have to expend ammunition or anything like that. It's all virtual, but it's accurate. So he was saying, obviously, previously video games haven't influenced violence and can't influence violence. However, with virtual reality today, I could accrue a lot of hours on a shooting game and it would be real world applicable. So for instance, I've got a game on my VR headset called Gun Club VR. It has a multitude of weapons, and they're real weapons. They're modelled around the real weapons, and they're operated like the real weapons. So I have to load the clip the way I would the real weapon. I have to cock it the way I would a real weapon, and it aims the same way. So I've got a VR table tennis game, and I know that's improved my table tennis. I know if I played table tennis now, I'd be far better at it because I've put in a number of hours in VR. So he's saying now that someone like Anders Breivik, for instance, I don't think he said this, but this is my example. If Anders Breivik had put loads more hours in on a virtual reality simulation, he probably would have got a higher body count. You know, somebody.
Yeah, but then you could say that about anything. Like, for example, if you're planning on committing an atrocity, you could practice it on a small scale somewhere else, without having to do the virtual reality thing. So you can easily go out and practice something. It's like when when psychopaths start out by killing animals or something. You know, they start off small, and then when they get good at it, or their appetite for blood is not,
I think I don't maybe
with that.
Maybe here's a clearer way of me trying to explain this. I don't think I could have condensed this very easily. So it's about transfer.
I know what you're trying to say. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it probably it is something that you could go out and do in the real world.
Yeah, it's transferable skill. If you play
what you already do on video games are. They're there to satisfy a demand. And, I mean, for example, you have games where you can like hack and slash at each other. And while, somebody else looking at it might think, what the hell? This just looks bad. It's also an outlet for people's aggression or their darker desires in like a safe fantasy world. So that it's not real. It's not happening in real life. You're just doing this as an outlet. It's a fantasy. You're not going to actually go and replicate that.
Yeah.
Reality.
I'm not saying that VR would inspire people. I'm saying if somebody wanted to do that, they could rack up some serious transferable skill in VR, out of sight, without any suspicions, and then go out and commit an atrocity. If I'm playing a first-person shooter on a game console, on a television, I'm tapping buttons and moving sticks. If I'm playing a first-person shooter in VR, I'm holding a weapon and I'm staring down the sight of a gun and I am aiming and I am increasing my proficiency without anyone in the outside world knowing that I'm doing that. So there's a transferable skill aspect of it that I think is going to make this debate a lot harder in the future. It's easy for me right now because I don't think video games, movies, music have any causal influence on violence. If you're going to commit violence because of a film you've seen or a game you've played or a song you've heard, there is some underlying mental issues there that need to be addressed before we start pointing the finger at entertainment. But VR might help someone be a more proficient killer. A lot of psychological stuff. I've read quite a few books.
You're right. I mean, like for example, with the El Paso shooter, the main fixation there was immigration, but he also wrote in his manifesto about excessive corporate power and environmental damage.
Which is generally lefty concern, so it's a bit strange.
Yeah. But the thing is, in these kind of cases, sometimes it's impossible to know whether the ideology has made that person violent or whether the violent desire came first and the half-baked justification followed after that. But what I was quite interested by and I'd like to have explored more was, in this Financial Times article, was about the games that, they don't encourage violence, but they interrogate. So I think, is it Hitman and Dishonored? They reward players who navigate their missions without bloodshed.
Yes.
So I thought that was quite interesting.
That's really funny. Because there's that, what's that called? A woman called Anita Sarkeesian, I think I've got her name right. She's built a career off basically going through video games and saying this isn't, female friendly enough. This is too violent. This promotes a negative gender stereotype. And I think she reviewed one of them games once and said how violent it was, that you could just beat people up and do, treat women really badly. And someone had to point out to her that the game actually penalizes you for doing them things. If you do them things in the game, you lose points, you lose progression. It's generally, you can behave that way. That's the sandbox aspect of computer games, but you will be penalised for it. But again, I would say I'm an animal rights advocate. I'm a vegan. I try and donate to animal causes. I really care about this issue. I'll chop an animal's head off in a computer game and not think twice about it. And them things are separate to me. That doesn't. Them things don't overlap. It's not real. I can draw the line between, fantasy and real life. And I think I kind of play people, give people the respect of assuming other people can too. So I don't understand why. We've got to point at all the firearms available in the country and how easily somebody can get one, either legally or illegally, before we start saying maybe you shouldn't play Hitman or Call of Duty.
Yeah. I mean, it is like we said before, it's not restricting it is not going to completely make all gun crime go away. I mean, in Norway, just last week, a gunman opened fire at a mosque in Oslo. There were 3 people inside. Fortunately, there weren't any more.
Oh, that brave guy in the mosque overpowered him, didn't he?
Yeah, so it was Mohammed Rafiq. He's a retired Pakistani Air Force officer.
Air Force?
Good
man.
Rapping. Managed to overpower Philip Man's house. Is it pronounced? He's a 21-year-old.
Don't say his name. Don't. Oh, sorry. Don't. I'm fucking sick of this.
Sorry. So he managed to prevent he who must not be named.
Yeah, fucking Voldemort.
And it turns out he was also charged with murder after his 17-year-old stepsister was found dead somewhere else, which is pretty grim. And I noticed that, a lot of people, again, were coming out with the same kind of comments as well, why is he not being called a terrorist? This is a terrorist attack.
Has he released any sort of manifest? Has anything else come out about this, about motivation? Because I kind of saw it.
Yeah, he did. So apparently Norwegian media reported that the suspect, I'm not naming him, the suspect apparently posted on some forum hours before the attack and there were references to a race war or something like that. And, he had acted on his own and he didn't want to give an explanation to police. So it'll come out sort of in due course, I reckon. But I think this is something that could have been more horrific than it was.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it isn't.
If this suspect had just clocked up a few more hours on, if he had an Oculus Quest and clocked up a fair few hours on Gun Club VR, we may be talking a very different story here, Iram.
Probably. The acting chief of the police operations, apparently they said he had far-right and anti-immigrant views as well, and expressed sympathy for the leader of Norway's government during the Nazi occupation. So clearly seems to have some very questionable views there.
Let me get your opinion on something here, because even if you hate immigrants and you hate Muslims and you go and shoot up a mosque full of Muslims, right? Now, is that terrorism, or I'm happy to say that, to me, my gut instinct, well, that's fucking terrorism. But is it terrorism, or is it a hate crime? Are you is this politically motivated, or are you just motivated by hatred? Because something like that can be a hate crime rather than terrorism.
The Christchurch killer was called a terrorist, wasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, the difference is the jihadist, they're trying to, usually they've pledged allegiance to ISIS, or they're doing it in the name of ISIS, which is a prescribed terrorist group, which is at war with, the government.
Yeah. Terrorism is very, very specific. So the actual definition of terrorism is the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. And I think in the US, they describe it as the unlawful use of force and violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government in furtherance of political or social objectives. Now, is that what this person wanted done? Did this guy want the government to take notice and change something? If that's the case, then it'd probably be called out as terrorism.
Yeah, whether they were, whether he released a manifesto, whether he's wrote something down, whether he shouted anything, you don't know. But I mean, a hate crime can look a lot like terrorism, and vice versa. So it is a murky one, and I don't want anyone getting off the charge of terrorism. If it is terrorism, I want it to be known. But I need to know the particulars. There are plenty of, for instance, there are plenty of Muslim people who have committed violent acts of murder, and I've said, well, that's not really terrorism. Because even there was a nanny in Russia who cut off the heads of the children she was looking at, and she was shouting Allahu Akbar. She was found to be quite clearly mentally deranged.
Yeah.
And I can't in all good conscience that she was trying to further a political agenda or overthrow the government.
Not. I mean, that, like we said, terrorism has to be something very, very specific. It's the same thing with in the Sydney stabbing. Oh, look, more murders.
Oh, yeah, there's another. It's been a busy couple of weeks for us, hasn't it?
It has. It really has. God, I'm exhausted. I think I need some.
Yeah, so let's just summarise what happened in Sydney. So these, a young man, an ethnic minority on appearance.
Don't mention his name.
I won't mention his name. The video footage released online of him. He was out in the streets with a blood-soaked knife, screaming Allahu Akbar. He looked on appearance, this is only a snap judgment based on aesthetics. He looked out of it in his face. Now, this is either a potential product of substances, or it is indicative of a mental illness. I am not a doctor, obviously. I don't have a PhD. I can't diagnose anyone on site, but sometimes human instincts give you certain information, and sometimes that is valuable and accurate for a reason. And I just think there's something going on there besides ideology.
Yeah, he shouted Allahu Akbar and then shoot me. So
yeah,
there's definitely something happening there.
So the motivations are either ideology, mental illness, or desire for death by cop. And now my point is, it could be all three. Why couldn't it be all three? Why couldn't he not? He could just want to, kill a few infidels, sure. You might think life's not worth living, and you're looking forward to paradise, and think death by police is the quickest way to go. And you might be mentally ill at the same time. Them things aren't mutually exclusive.
But he wasn't expecting to be taken down by a bunch of Mancunian lads. Well done, kidders.
Supermanx.
Well, yeah. See, we're just amazing.
That is, I love the fact. I bet
they were just sat there like, yeah, what's going on outside? All right, what's going on, yeah? Nah, that's not right, man, that's not right.
Yeah, I'll leave it out.
Yeah, leave it. That's minging.
I love the fact that you can't throw a stick near any bar quarter in Manchester without hitting an Australian barman. And we seem to have some sort of exchange program, which is great. I think if we have to take Rolf Harris off their hands, they should have to take a few Manx as well. But it was just nice to see. a couple of Mancunian lads overthrowing a terrorist in the street, and we are making light of it. But it's to make us some toxic masculinity there, Iram. A couple of men just deciding on site to tackle and apprehend a knife wielding maniac. So fair play to them. Did you say? I think you've told me previously that they were from the Chadderton region.
I think one of the.
We're not doxing them now, are we? Is this public information?
No, one of the guys' mum gave an interview to the MEN. She works in Chadderton, so I don't know if she actually lives there, but but practically related.
Yeah. So well done to them, brave lads. I mean, it's not an easy task to do that. So we'll find out what comes in the coming weeks and months about this one.
There was a few people who when we put out an announcement for questions who said, what can the media learn from this? And I thought that was quite interesting, because I think media tends to be we tend to be quite cautious when reporting these things, because again, like I said, you never know what's going to happen. It's an ongoing developing story. Anything can change any minute. So the bare minimum will be reported. Whereas, you'll have some morons on Twitter or Facebook who'll say, oh, why aren't they saying what's the elephant in the room here? It's called Islam. And you think, oh, mate, you don't even know that now. Okay. We don't know that. We don't even know if it's terrorism. Could just be a lunatic. Could be someone who's suicidal. We don't know that right now. And, just because you have an opinion based on absolutely nothing right now doesn't mean that every other journalist in the world has to report what you think is right. I just think we should wait until we get the full facts before commenting.
Yeah.
I think Katie Hopkins, that vile twat, should take a lesson from this. She was very quick to point out how in Norway, that mosque had a load of weapons in it. She said, oh, why didn't the police know about this? Oh, why were there weapons in this mosque? And then it turns out, actually, they were connected to the shooter. So,
fuck's sake. This is the problem, right? So the question was, what can the media learn from this? Which is a good question in the nebulous about, what information can we discern and talk about in the immediate aftermath of a terrorist atrocity or a seemingly terrorist atrocity. But it's not necessarily the media that's the problem. It's these social commentators that have to have the hot take. They have to be there ASAP to give the comment, to get the likes and the clicks and you're telling the truth, you're telling us what the media won't tell us, even if it's bullshit, even if it's nonsense, even if you've made a snap decision and jumped to conclusion. I see that, time and time again. And I'm quite, I have to say, often dull on these topics when they happen. I will look for the fact. If you go to my Twitter timeline and put my name in and search for the phrase "wait for the facts" or "wait on the facts," you will find hundreds of tweets, all in the aftermath of an attack, whether it's Islamist, whether it's white supremacist, whether it's neither, of me saying, wait on the facts. Don't add to this cacophony of misinformation on social media. Everyone wants the narrative, and everyone wants. People follow Kate Hopkins because they don't want to think too deeply about what is true. They want the narrative. Yeah, Muslims bad. The end of Europe. This kind of thing. They'll accept that straight away. A bad take on Twitter will have thousands and thousands of retweets, and even when the truth comes out, that remains there. That nobody goes back and goes, "Oh, they're probably going to tweet that now." Or they won't hold that person accountable for sharing the. I just don't understand why people don't work on a trust system. If somebody I follow on Twitter or I assumed was an objective, valuable source gets it wrong a couple of times in a very egregious way, I'm done with that person. I'm like, well, I can't trust you anymore because you jumped to conclusions and spread misinformation on a whim, when it's easy just to sit back a minute and say, hang a minute, wait till we've got all the pieces on the chessboard before we start making moves.
But again, people just want to hear what they already think. It's confirmation bias. I don't think they really go to these people because they think they're a reliable source of accurate information. They just go because they're going to tell them what, the biased mainstream media won't tell you.
Yeah, I think that's entirely true. They just want their own narratives mirrored back to them. Mm-hmm. So, where are we, and what do we want to talk about next?
Should we move on to sexist adverts?
Yes. So that was a news article that was sent in to me when I was asking for questions before from Maisie Lady, aka I Smile at Dogs, she sent the news article on that. If you're gonna smile at something, why not dogs?
I mean, as long as you're just smiling at them and not.
The problem's when they smile back. That's when you've got to worry. So she sent in a BBC article. She said, thoughts on this? And the headline is Philadelphia and VW. Philadelphia being the cheese product. Philadelphia, not the place. And Volkswagen ads banned for gender stereotyping. Now, I think we may have touched on this thing a fair few episodes back.
Did they portray women as bad drivers or something?
Well, this is really funny, because this is...
not being able to read maps.
Yeah, visual spatial awareness is a problem for you ladies. You need to deal with that.
Yeah, I'm the one who's manspreading on the tube every day.
Well, the funny thing about this story is... So, long story short, in our commercials in the UK, in our adverts, our TV adverts for products, they've decided now that gender stereotypes can be damaging. So they want to erase gender stereotypes from our adverts. So you can't have the woman, the flustered mum in the kitchen cooking, running around after the kids, holding the family together while the dad sits in front of the TV.
That's actually fucking true in so many houses.
Everyone falls into type eventually. It's the law of the land. It happens. But... So what's really funny about these ads? So these adverts from Volkswagen and Philadelphia, the spreadable cheese, they fell afoul of these laws. But the funny thing about this is they were actually trying to be woke. They actually thought they don't want to have the female stereotype in these adverts. So you know what we'll do? We'll make men the butt of the joke in the adverts, and they've been slapped on the wrist for that, because of course, if you're going to outlaw gender stereotypes in adverts, you've got to do it for all genders, all 500 of them. So I'll read from the BBC article. Television advertisements from US food giant Mondelez, is it Mondelez or Mondelez? I don't know, and German car maker Volkswagen are the first to be banned under new UK gender stereotyping rules. Fuck me. Imagine living in a place where you have gender stereotyping rules in your commercial. Okay, so a ban on ads featuring, quote, harmful gender stereotypes, end quote, of those which are likely to cause, quote, serious or widespread offence came into force in June. So these are the first, these are patient zeros for these new laws. They're the first ones to be banned. Okay, so basically, the advert's shown two men being fairly useless at parenting, being absent-minded and leaving the kid, forgetting the kid, or letting the kid get up to mischief and not noticing. This idea of the bumbling father who's incompetent, kind of thing. And Mondelez argued, quote, that the ad showed a positive image of men with a responsible and active role in childcare in modern society. So they're saying, hey, we're not showing that just the women have to look after the kids, the men are doing it here too.
And they're doing a shit
job.
And
that's the problem. That's why they got into trouble. They were doing a shit job. It said it chose to feature a pair of fathers to avoid a stereotype of new mothers being responsible for children. So they thought, oh, hey, we won't have the women looking after the kids. Let's have the men look after the kids. Hey, isn't this progressive? This should get some woke bonus points.
I think the ad wasn't racially diverse enough, so boo.
I'm not offended, but when people lean into this gender stereotyping thing, they're usually almost exclusively talking about women, how hard women have it with the gender stereotyping. And that's when I'd pop and go, hang on, how many things do I see men in portrayed in a certain way, which is...
Like leaving their kid on a restaurant conveyor.
Yeah, that, but every sitcom on the planet makes fun of the fact that the dad's a deadbeat and he's dumb. Homer Simpson, Peter Griffin, Married with Children. Every single sitcom has the bumbling, incompetent, waste of space father who's there to be the butt of all the jokes. Usually middle-aged, a little bit, yeah.
Friends, Chandler and Joey leave baby Ben on the bus. They should ban that.
But I don't go, how dare you that Joey Tribbiani is a thick, narcissistic, womanizing, sexist. How dare you choose to represent my gender in such way? No, he's an entertaining character. Give me fucking entertaining characters. Give me something interesting. Give me a product that I want to buy. I don't care whether or not this is another thing. So if we're talking about representation as well, we're talking about representation only if it's positive. And I think this is silly. I think you should. I'm going to queue up day one for the first mass murdering, psychopathic, transgender horror movie. I will watch that because I've not seen that before. That's interesting. That's new. I don't know, maybe you could count Psycho actually, but they won't allow that. That'll never happen because they'll say, "How dare you portray the trans community?" As if one character in a film is holding the weight of the entire trans community on their back. I don't get this obsession now with.
What about The Simpsons? In the opening credit, Marge, forgets about Maggie, and she gets left on the checkout belt, and then she's treated like a grocery item. Is that sexist?
Homer leaves work at a nuclear power plant with a piece of radioactive material. That's how scatterbrained he is. Doesn't he nearly run everyone over?
What about Daddy Pig? He's always useless. Daddy Pig in Peppa Pig cartoon. Everyone calls him Silly Daddy. But what about that? Is Peppa Pig going to be banned? Is she going to be given a woke makeover?
I saw I couldn't even read it the other day. I saw a headline on an article from a fairly mainstream publication. I think I want to say The Guardian, but it might not have been. But some asshole. Some film journalist who was lucky enough to see Quentin Tarantino's new movie early spent the entire movie counting how many lines of dialogue Margot Robbie's character had.
Oh my God.
Margot Robbie, the poor, oppressed, downtrodden female Hollywood millionaire superstar who's loved, adored, and desired by most people on the planet. Apparently she got a rough deal making a Quentin Tarantino film because she didn't have enough lines in a film set, I think, in the 70s.
Still got paid fucking loads for it.
Yeah, and I just don't understand the people who say, who are that obsessed that they have to see every minute thing as an offence against their principles and their pet projects of gender, race. Who are so obsessed with these things that they can't go and watch a Tarantino film without counting lines of dialogue.
Jesus Christ! I mean, if that's not, oh God, what a sad bastard.
Yeah. Case in point, Toy Story.
Yeah. Oh God.
Not real people. Not real people. Yeah, I found it quite compelling because the characters were good. The story was good. It was very whimsical, well put together, well produced, well directed, quite moving in places. Could not give two shits whether them characters were anything other than toys, because that's what people want when they go to the cinema. I think, don't get me wrong, I am being glib. Representation can be good. I get it. I get that young girls now get to dress up as Wonder Woman or Captain Marvel. They've got a female character that they can get behind. I get that can be quite important to some people, but I think audiences are more astute than the woke liberal Hollywood elite thinks. I think audiences know when a cynical political agenda is being sold to them rather than
That's
character.
Why they never do well. They never do well. That's why all the the original movies do well. When you try and put an agenda on it, it just they don't think about the entertainment, and at the end of the day, films are all about entertainment as well. And it's like that's become second now. Like, oh, so what if millions of people don't watch it? We were woke at least. That's the main thing.
It doesn't matter if we destroyed the franchise or we got a film, we torpedoed a film because we didn't think that Scarlett Johansson had the chops to play a transgender person because she's not actually trans. So we're just no one's going to see that film now. No, I don't even remember the name of the person. Apparently it's based on some quite influential, important figure in this movement, the film that Scarlett Johansson was going to star in as this person, this biopic. And because she wasn't trans, the wokerati came for her and the film got cancelled. So I'm never going to hear this. I'm never going to hear the story of this trans individual who was important. Apparently, millions of people across the world may have learned about this and become more empathetic to trans issues. But no, they won't, because it's been canned.
Well, it's like you mentioned as well that Volkswagen had an advert ban because 3 fucking people complained that it had 2 male astronauts and the woman was a child carer. I mean, for fuck's sake, 3 people complain and that's reason to, ban an advert. The ISBA, the trade body, actually, and they're the ones who helped design the rules. They actually expressed unhappiness with the advertisement body. They said that the rulings, these initial rulings were quite concerning, and that that there's going to be a really bad precedent that they could set, and the impact that they're going to have on other advertisers. And these decisions probably go beyond the intent of what the new rules were supposed to be there for. So they're, hopefully if they discuss that with the ASA in due course, they might get that reversed. You never know. But yeah, it's just absolutely ridiculous, the whole thing. I mean, it's like no one can fucking. It's like no one knows how to entertain. No one can tell a joke. I mean, another case, an example. Gwent police posted this wanted drug dealer's mugshot on Facebook and warned it could take action against abusive comments after his fucking hairstyle was mocked online. His hairstyle was mocked, and so this guy, sorry, Jermaine Taylor, his name is. Oh, am I allowed to say his name? They posted it on Facebook, and there were about 89,000 comments under the image, and there were like comments ranging from, "Oh, push his release date back further than his hairline should reach him." And another said, "He was last seen in town. Police are combing the area."
Yeah. Oh, he looked like he had. That hair was clinging on. To be fair, and he looked like he was in a wind tunnel. I made a joke that I don't know what's more concerning, his hair or his 5 head. And
police could come after you now.
Good. I'm sick of this censorious Orwellian attitude towards expression that the UK police seems to have. Go and sort out some crime. Don't be arresting people for shouting stuff or posting stuff on the internet. That'd be such a headache ender for the police if one day they just turn around and go, you know what, this hate speech thing's a bit silly, it's taking up a lot of resources, it's pointless anyway, have at it, we'll deal with the other stuff. And I think that'd be fine, because that's how America operates, and we haven't got the guns, so we'd be fine.
We'd be fine. And you're right about this sort of Orwellian nature. I don't know if you've commented on this yet, but the comedian Sarah Silverman, she was on the Bill Simmons podcast recently, and then she said she was fired from a film after producers found a still of her in 2007 wearing blackface for a comedy sketch.
Yeah.
She said that she was let go the day before because somebody found this photo of her. She didn't say which film it was, but she talks about this cancel
probably culture. Ghostbusters.
Yeah, probably.
Which, if you weren't too hot on the prospect of a Ghostbusters all-female led reboot, you're a misogynist. Apparently, it's the only explanation.
Yeah. She also called this phenomenon righteous porn, and I think she's got a point, really, because this is something that happened 12 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm. I think
years ago.
Toby Young in The Spectator came up for a great term for this. I don't know if it's his, but I definitely saw it in one of his articles. He referred to it as outrage archaeology.
Yeah. I think she apologized for it as well, said it wasn't probably the best thing she could have done. I don't know what you think. Do you think she was right to have done that? Should she have been fired for it? What?
Well, the first thing I want to point out is the barefaced hypocrisy of Sarah Silverman. If she wants to talk about righteousness porn, she is a chief purveyor. She is the ultimate virtue signalling woke robot on Twitter, which is really sad to see. Yeah, it's really sad to see for me because she's a comedian I genuinely love and respect. Christopher Hitchens was wrong when he said women aren't funny. That was a rare misstep in an otherwise glowing litany of articles, but she's brilliant. She's absolutely spectacular on stage. I've always loved her, but again, with the election of Trump, it's deranged. There's Trump derangement syndrome. I think there's a little bit of truth to it. It sent a few people a bit doolally, and she was one of them, constantly, screeching the most ridiculous hyperbole about Trump. And my point was,
happens, isn't it? It comes around
the
end, doesn't it?
I tweeted out it doesn't matter how many deposits you make at the Bank of Woke, they'll bankrupt you too eventually. That's how they work.
They can't complain then, can they? Because they've been advocating all along. So, they have to take one for the team.
Now I've pointed that out, and I've said, sort of what goes around comes around. I still think she's perfectly justified in blacking up for a comedy sketch. That's what it was. And from what I've seen, she was actually making a satirical point about racism. She wasn't blacking up and saying, look at me, I'm a black person, isn't this hilarious? She was making a satirical point about racism. There are some people who are incapable. There's a line, basically. So it doesn't matter now they've decided it doesn't matter what context you black up in, it's racist. It doesn't matter what context you say the N-word in, it's racist. And that's just not true. We've become strangely more conservative on these topics. The problem is, if you're going to do blackface or say the N-word, the joke's got to be exceptionally good. But it'll still be misunderstood. So I think she should be rehired. It's just people are so... You know what I'm waiting for? I'm waiting for the one movie producer or director who's questioned about representation or the past actions of actors, and for them to say, you know what, I don't give a shit about gender politics, identity politics. It's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to make entertainment that you love, and that's what I'm going to try and do. That guy will get my cinema ticket money.
Didn't Tarantino pretty much say that?
I'm not sure. I think he always gets asked about movie violence, and he's kind of said he's shutting that shit down now. He's not talking about it. But the Hollywood do seem overwhelmingly lovey-dovey, lefty liberal. They seem to live in this bubble where they think they're some sort of saviors who are going to cure the world of racism and misogyny just by casting a few more women, casting a few non-white people. That's gonna change. If only Martin Luther King had a movie studio, maybe he'd have made more of a difference. And I just think it's they've got savior complexes. They soon find out when they put it into a film that it's not nearly as popular as they think. And there's a lot of minorities who say, I don't want pandering too, thank you very much. Can you just give me good movies?
Yeah, I agree with that. So not too long ago, the BBC did a programme about circumcision. I don't know if you watched it, but I certainly did. Adnan Sarwar did this documentary because as a born Muslim, or someone born to Muslim parents, he was circumcised when he was a baby, like the thousands of boys in the UK who are circumcised for religious or cultural reasons. And here it's becoming a bit of a controversial topic now, and several European countries are considering a ban on it unless there are medical reasons for the operation to be carried out. So the documentary was asking if this was something that the UK should consider banning as well. In the program, he spoke to Dr. Jonathan Romain. He's a rabbi and a leading Jewish scholar. And he said that circumcision is mentioned in the Jewish holy book, and it's seen as one of God's commands, and it's integral to the faith. Basically, if you're a Jewish boy, you have to have it done because that is part of your identity. If you're not circumcised, then are you really a Jew? So the vast majority of people who are Muslim and Jewish support it, but then there are people from within who are speaking out against it. There's a Jewish woman, Dr. Jenny Goodman, she said that she thinks circumcision is a feminist issue. She said it's not just about children's rights, it's about the rights of the mother who's just given birth, not to her baby boy. And then he was going into the medical evidence, and they spoke to a urologist who said that there's evidence that circumcised boys are marginally less likely to develop urinary tract infections, but they're rare anyway, and they're treatable with antibiotics. And the majority of circumcised men have no complaints about the procedure because there's a very small risk of serious harm, which I know you will get into.
If you shave everyone's head, they're very unlikely to get nits.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I'll take the risk. Yeah,
and, the debate saw him sort of being pulled both ways, really. It was quite funny. He went back to his hometown in Lancashire, and he saw one of his Muslim friends and said, "Oh, I'm just doing a film about circumcision." And he went, "Yeah, they chopped about a foot off me."
As he wasn't Preston by any chance, was it?
I think it was Nelson.
I
can't remember.
Far. Well,
I think it was some town, but basically, there was this. Yeah, so the Jewish mother that he spoke to in that said that she refused to circumcise her son, and so he's always known that he's different from the other boys, and she just said that it's something that it would have been his decision to make, and why should she have done it for him, and that there's more to being a Jew than just having your penis circumcised, whereas other Jews see it as
the bagels as well, isn't it?
Yes,
circumcision and bagels, that's it.
Exactly. So but the thing is, his conclusion was really disappointing. He basically ended it with circumcision should be banned because people will do it anyway. Well, this is stupid because FGM was made illegal even though people still try and carry it out. I think the most disturbing aspect of this was that it's not regulated. I did not know that it's not regulated, that you can pretty much just carry out that anyone can carry out that procedure, really. There's no way of regulating it. So I think the rabbi was saying that he would support regulation of it, and he's always made sure that when he's got his son circumcised, he's always made sure it's been done from someone reputable. And yeah, so I don't know. I think I'm very familiar with your views on this, actually. I very much, I can see the case against it, but I think this is one of those decisions that's not made from a logical point of view. It's very, very much something that's quite emotional because it taps into your identity. It's all about how you feel. It's about how you identify. And if you feel strongly with your Jewish identity or your Muslim identity, you think, okay, I have to do this because everyone else does it. And if I don't do it, then how's that going to look to the community? Even if on a logical level you think, is this really necessary? Do I have to do this? And at the end of the day, if you want to live in your community, you kind of feel like you have to do it.
First of all, that was a great aspect of it in terms of the trying to make this a almost feminist issue. This is male circumcision as a feminist issue, the right of the mother to decide, because the man tends to decide these things. And I don't know if you remember, we have discussed this on the show, but a while back there was a Muslim wife and husband. They had a child. I think they separated, and during the sort of custody battles and things like that, the father was pushing for the son to be circumcised. He hadn't been circumcised yet, and the woman took this to the court. She wanted the son to be of an adult age and decide for themselves. He wanted him to be made right with Allah ASAP, and the judge actually ruled in favour of the mother and said, no, we'll let the lad decide. And I thought, well, that's a good precedent to set, but why isn't that universally applied? Why is it only applied in this instance of a contention between two parents? The second thing I'd say as well is men do get shortchanged on this issue. Male circumcision's joked about or thought of as inane, benign, and that's not true. There's a lot of complications, and even if there isn't complications, there's a lot more secondary issues as well with it. But I remember Brian Earp, you saw him give his talk at the National Secular Society. I saw him in Birmingham as well give a talk, and he was saying there's also a certain, under the umbrella of FGM, there are various procedures I'll call them procedures, ranging from horrific to not as horrific. Now, in the not as horrific scale, there's something known as the ritual nick, which is unnecessary, should be illegal, don't do it, but it's very unlikely to cause complications. So I'm led to believe, right? Now, that's illegal in this country. You can't give a young female infant a ritual nick circumcision, as it's known, right? However, you can remove a massive chunk of skin that won't grow back, that's irreversible, from a male infant, and that's completely legal, which is a more invasive procedure, more likely to cause complications, etc. And that's been normalised culturally. So it's just a very strange hypocrisy here. And I've got a very easy answer for this. Don't chop bits off children's genitals unnecessarily. There are rare occasions where it is necessary because of medical issues. Sure, ritual circumcision, unacceptable in every guise. I understand that the more extreme female version of it is far worse. Sure, but it doesn't mean we can't talk about male circumcision as well. It seems to be one or the other to some people.
And I think that I think the problem is that you can't necessarily. Nobody wants to ban it because they know there'll be an uproar.
Yeah.
And
you'll be accused of being an anti-Semite, an anti-Muslim. I'm not circumcised. I'm not Jewish. I'm not of any religious background. It's not. And my American listeners as well. Actually, there's another aspect of this. It's quite common in places outside of Europe as a sort of cultural thing. There's a lot of non-Jewish male. I think, obviously circumcised penises are the default in the porn industry. I think it's the default in America in most places. Some parents in America now who are not Jewish or have any religious faith are actually saying, maybe we won't get our child circumcised because it's quite normal for that, to be just something you do. In Europe, that's not the case at all. It's not. It's the exception to the rule if you are circumcised. Usually, because the religious people, you Jews, you Muslims, are minorities in this country. But if that had happened to me, if that had been done to me, and I'd reached adult age, I'd be furious about that. Round about now, like, how dare you make that unalterable decision to my body for me before I've even learned a single word of the English language, before I've even learned anything about who I'm going to be or what I want from life. I'd be absolutely furious about it. And I think you'll see in the near future, I think you'll see a lot of adults suing their parents or the state for allowing this to happen, or the medical practitioners who carried it out. I think there'll be a lot of lawsuits to come in the future when people get a bit older and realise how batshit insane it is you can legally hack at an infant's genitals.
Yeah. I think it's really going to take people from within those communities as well to just say, no, we don't want to do it. And I wonder what the percentage is. I don't think you can know until you get people to drop their trousers, I guess, which I don't want to see.
But you reflexively defend it. If that's you and someone's saying how bad circumcision is and you're hearing it, you're like, oh my God, I'm circumcised. You might feel a little bit attacked. You might feel like, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm fine. And get defensive.
That's the defense, isn't it? Well, there's nothing wrong with me. We're okay. I don't know any different. But it's not really the point, I guess. But people from those communities really should be stepping up a bit more now, I think, and just be challenging it. And I'm seeing a bit of it online. I just wonder what the percentage is, really. I don't think it's in great numbers, though. But considering how these conversations are happening, I'm sure that it's at least penetrating into their psyche now, that it is making people think a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, imagine there's a culture, and I'm sure there is, but maybe not so much. But maybe there's an advanced culture. Let's just say an alien race that arrives, can communicate, quite advanced. Fairly rational and logical society, stable, works fine. They have no concept of circumcision whatsoever. Could we explain that to them in a way that they'd understand and accept and go, oh yeah, sure, that makes sense? it'd be like, what? You do what? Because of what? Why? There are certain cultural practices that we could explain to people, that, well, we do this because of this and it has this effect on society. Oh yeah, great. But I don't think there is any good argument. Now, I mean, what happened is years ago, we just accept the religious argument. We'd just say, oh yeah, well, they're a Jew, they're a Muslim, it's their faith. Now, thanks to the increase of secularism and human rights, we can push back against that kind of thing without getting killed and or burned at the stake. So, which is nice, don't get me wrong. So now they hear these new arguments that they try and push forward, like, you're less likely to get a sexually transmitted disease, there's less likely to be infections and things like that if you're circumcised. And none of that, when you boil it down to the facts and the particulars, really stacks up, to be honest. So what I'd do is I'd recommend, I filmed Brian Earp give a lecture on this at the Secular Medical Forum in Birmingham. That's on my YouTube channel. If you just search for Brian Earp and Godless Spell Checker, you'll find that on YouTube, and that's fascinating. I included all his slides as well. He has some really interesting and detailed slides, and it's if you don't know anything about circumcision, all I'd say is it's worse than you think. If you just know the basics, there's a foreskin removed from an infant, that's what circumcision is, and that's kind of your surface level knowledge, which is what my knowledge was up until a couple of years ago. It'll blow your mind to see what the actual procedure is and what it means and the implications of it and the problems that it could cause.
I'm still having flashbacks of his presentation at the National Secular Society.
Yes, so I'm guessing, I can't remember if he's shown the same slide that he's shown in the Birmingham.
Is the one I'm thinking of? Yeah.
Here's the great thing about Brian, though. So what he does is he could make this argument really easy for himself and talk solely about illegal circumcision, because there's a lot of that as well. He could talk a lot about the really ultra-Orthodox Jews in New York who actually bite the foreskin off of infants and, transmit herpes. There's been infants that have caught herpes from... this sounds like some bizarre anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. No, it's not. It's in the New York Times. It's in the New York newspapers. It's happened a few times. Just put into Google,
No,
yeah.
I'm not going to put that into Google.
It's an ultra-Orthodox Jewish tradition of circumcision where I think they cut majority of the foreskin and then the rest of it's removed by the mouth of a rabbi. Okay, so he could go for them outliers. He could go for them really horrendous things. He could go for the ill-equipped, unqualified backstreet surgeon bodging it. No, he doesn't. He shows you in that slide what circumcision is in a perfect clinical environment when everything goes to the textbook plan. And it's still like, wow, that's how much to remove. That's how they do it. And it's mind-blowing to see that. I mean, you're a virgin. I mean, you had the same reaction I did to that slide. It was just pure... Nice. Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, I'm crossing my legs just thinking about it. And so it is worse than you think, but it's been sold to us under the guise of religious freedom and or hygiene, which are both bullshit arguments, logically and ethically. So yeah, I think this is going to become a massive issue in the coming generations. A lot of people are going to be very annoyed that they've been needlessly mutilated. I remember when I brought this up on the panel at Battle of Ideas with Ed Hussein, ex-Quilliam. He took massive... He was on my panel with me. He took massive exception to the word mutilation. I used the word mutilation to describe circumcision, and he took massive exception to that because he's just not thought about it in that context. Yeah, exactly. But it's literally what it is. If you're... What do they call themselves, these people who are activists for this cause? Intactivists. Because they're talking about intact, and that's very clever. But yeah, this is going to be a massive issue, I think.
Do we have any questions to go through, do you reckon?
Let's have a look.
Let's pick some good ones. We've gone through most of them. The only one that we haven't really is collective worship and Jessica Yaniv, really.
The Jessica Yaniv thing is an amazing story. It's a car crash. I can't look away from. I have been checking in on that, and it gets a little bit more absurd. She is whatever,
a horrible, horrible person.
Yeah. And that's not because she's trans. This is interesting because I don't know if we're going to have time to get into this, but she is an individual born biologically male, now identifies as a female. She made it her mission. She's still got male genitalia, by the way. She made it her mission to visit a number of waxing salons in Canada and demand that they wax her scrotum. And when they refuse because they say, either said we don't do men or we don't do penises, she's filed discrimination lawsuits against a lot of them. And she's trying to sue them. Basically, wax my balls or I will sue you.
Basically, it's a load of bollocks.
Hey!
It is, isn't it? I mean, two of the
Literally.
women who refused to touch him, they've been already forced out of business. I mean, how is that good for women's rights if you're going to force women out of business because they don't want to touch your fucking dick? No one wants to touch your dick. Stop being a dick. Oh my God, I can't believe this has even managed to go through courts. It's fucking ridiculous. Some of these women are migrants as well. They don't want to do anything like this.
Jessica Yaniv is quite racist as well, from what I've seen. Very anti-immigrant. Very,
Isn't she also, isn't this, I don't know if this is for him or for someone else. I can't remember where I read this, but they said it was also some sort of weird sexual kick for her as well. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah. So
that's bad. That is really, really bad, and it's so unfair as well on these poor women. And if the case is lost against him, her, then that's going to set a really dangerous precedent.
Yeah.
It really is, and this is bad for women.
I keep saying this trans ideological battle we have, and I'm not talking about trans rights. Trans rights should be guaranteed without question. But the ideological battle we're having now about prison systems, bathrooms, jobs, for instance. So, like the, jobs that would normally be offered to a woman. I think Labour did this. A woman's, I can't remember what the position was. They gave it to a trans woman. So a man who had transitioned to a woman now gets a role that was reserved for a biological woman. The sports now, you're finding male to female trans athletes competing and just cleaning up for reasons which are mysterious to me. And so what I'm finding is in this issue, women are generally are the collateral damage. Now, when obviously trans women are women, I'm talking about biological women who would typically have, in the past, played second fiddle to men until great advances in equality. Now, it feels to them like that's been dialed back a little bit by valuing the rights of a biological male over them. So I don't know how we figure this out. It's a massive ideological minefield, but there seems to be a problem with the progressive left reflexively defending anything trans, regardless of how batshit crazy it is. And I think we need to be a bit more rational. I think being rational and committed to the truth of something will actually only help trans people in the long run.
Is there something happening behind you? I can
hear
like a churning.
It's the rain hitting the attic.
Fucking hell,
I know,
really.
it's a nightmare.
Okay. Well, I think this is completely ridiculous, and I hate using this phrase, but it's true. It's Orwellian. You can be a bigot just for believing in reality and stating a fact. Now, in this case, that if you have a penis, you're not a woman. And I think there's one thing to ensure that transgender people have their rights. It's quite another to pressure women to handle a penis against their will. I think it's just crossed the line now. It really has crossed a line.
Is there anything else you wanted to say before the rain takes my house away?
I'm dying to pee, so I think this is a good time now.
So,
call it a day.
Iram's bladder brings proceedings to the end.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
No problemo.
Thank you for listening to the Godless Spellchecker podcast. The podcast is a one-man operation, produced in my spare time away from my day job, and I love making it for you. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider lending some support. The show is entirely listener supported. I don't sell anything, I don't run ads, and given the alternative and unpopular focus of my content, it's very unlikely to find a sponsor. So there are a number of ways you can support and chip in and help improve the show and give me more time to produce more content. You can become a patron supporter and pledge a monetary amount per month or per episode by visiting patreon.com/gspellchecker. If you can't lend monetary support right now, don't worry, there's other ways you can help the podcast too. You can share it on your various social media networks, or take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to it. Your support is massively appreciated. Thank you. Think we've all learned something here today?